This lesson is about how to draw a sea turtle. I'm going to be drawing on a piece of regular drawing paper with a pencil, and I'm going to be doing my coloring using some Crayola colored pencils. I have a messy mat under my paper just in case I make a mess while I work. I'm going to begin with my pencil drawing my turtle going in a diagonal across my paper. So I'm going to begin drawing his shell by creating a curving line that comes around. And then I'm going to extend that line a little bit flat at the top and swing down another curving line around on the other side that's going to touch back to the other line, so it creates my oval-like shape for the shell. So I now have a space for the back of the turtle and the front of the turtle where the head is going to be. So I'm going to turn my paper diagonally while I work to draw the flippers. I'm going to begin with a curving line that goes a little bit down and comes back up, and then a big curving line that's going to swing down to start creating the edge of the fin or the flipper. And then on the back side of that, I'm going to create a wiggly line that's going to come all the way down and around at the bottom to create the first flipper. And for the other flipper on the other side, it's a mirrored image, meaning it's going to look exactly the same as the first flipper that I drew, it's just facing the other direction. So I'm going to begin with that slight small curved line, curve it all the way down, and then I'm going to make that wiggly line that's going to be the other side of the flipper that touches back to the bottom. And then for the two back flippers, I'm just going to create two small curved lines that touch back to the shell to create those two back fins. They don't have to be perfect, they can be a little wiggly. Now I'm going to go up to the head of the turtle. A lot of times when people want to draw the sea turtle's head, they just want to do a curved line, but we're going to make it look a little more realistic. I'm going to begin with a small curved line on each side for the neck, and then the head of the turtle is actually going to swing out just a little bit, and it's going to have a tip for the nose, and then mirror it on the other side to make the other part of the turtle's head. And if at any time you decide you need to change up anything, like maybe you made the neck too skinny and you want to thicken it up, just erase your pencil line and draw it again. I always tell my students to remember to draw it light until you get it right, which means you don't push down on your pencil too hard while you're drawing so you can erase mistakes later. Here I'm just adding in some wrinkles on the neck of my turtle just by creating some lines that go side to side across the neck. And then I'm going to map in two little spaces for the eyes of my turtle. I'm then going to move on to adding in some of the spots on the back of my turtle's head by creating these random blob-shaped circles that just fill in that back space. And then I'm going to add in two little curving lines around those eyes. Then I can start doing the details as well on my flippers, just like I did on the head. I'm going to add in some of those random shaped blobbed circles on the flippers, just like I did before, starting with the outside edges of the flipper and then filling in those random shapes. And once I finished my back two flippers, I went ahead and jumped up to my front two flippers, again doing the same process, starting with some shapes along the edges and then filling in all around those with some random blob shapes. I'm just creating some little circular blobs. Some of them can be really perfect, some of them don't have to be, it's up to you. These are just creating some details on your fins. And next I'm going to begin the details on the back of the shell. So I'm going to start with a line that's going to go down and curve around, leaving a little bit of space between that line and the outer edge of the shell. Do the same thing on the other side. And this is going to be the outer rim of our turtle shell. So then I can add in some straight lines all the way around to finish filling in some details. Next, we're going to fill in the shapes in the center of the shell. I'm going to begin by creating a squiggly lined, kind of blob-like shape that touches from the one point of the shell and then down to the other. And I'm going to repeat that similar shape all the way up the center of the shell of my turtle. And I'm going to stop once I run out of space. So once I've filled in all of those, then I'm just going to kind of find some edges along those blob shapes to create a squiggly line that touches down to that edge of the line that we had drawn just right before this. Squiggly lines all the way around, and we will have a finished shell detail. And before we begin coloring, this is your chance to go back and fix any little lines and details you may not like. Like here, I decided to make the nose just a little bit shorter, and I wanted to round out the top of the shell just a little bit more. If you remember to draw lightly while you were creating your outline for your turtle, this should be a breeze to erase. When you are ready, we will then begin our coloring. You can choose to color your turtle any way that you would like and with any materials that you would like. I'm just going to be using colored pencils, so I do have my pencil sharpener here while I work, and I'm going to be doing a dark green and a light green for the flippers of my turtle, and I'm going to be using some browns with a little black for some of those spot details as well as the shell. And I'm going to be shading my turtle in realistically. Again, if you want to shade yours differently, you totally can. I'm going to begin with my dark green, and I'm going to start shading along the edges of my turtle's head along with those wrinkles that I added in on the neck. I like to do some darker shading along the edges and then add lighter shading on the inside. So here you can see I'm using my dark green along the edges, and then I'm going in with my lighter green to just fill in the rest of the turtle's head. I like to keep the dark green mostly to the edges of the turtle's face and then fill in the light green around all those little spot details. Once I get all of that filled in, I'm going to use the black to go over those eyes to make sure I can see those on my turtle, and the brown to fill in those spots along the back of the turtle's head. Then, using my black color pencil and coloring in a rounded circular motion, I'm just going to brush a little bit of black in on the outside edges of those spots. And by brush, I mean I'm just lightly shading in some of that black there. Then I'm going to go back with my dark green, finish filling in any extra little details. And then my fun secret is using my eraser on my pencil to create some highlights on my turtle's face. And once I'm done with the head, I'm going to move down to the fins, and I'm going to start with my light green, shading in the whole fin around those dots. And what I did, you'll see, is I didn't color in exactly perfect around those dots. My green kind of overlapped those spots a little bit, because when I go back over with the brown and the black, it's going to cover over the light green since black and brown are darker colors. I used my dark green along the edges mostly. I did kind of brush the dark green in a little bit on the fins, just in some random spots, and I used my eraser to create the highlights. Once I was done with all of that, then I went in with my brown and my black, and I began to do the same technique I was doing on the head, coloring in the brown first, and then I'm going to be using black on top of that just along the outside edges of those dots to create some more details. To achieve a more realistic look, make sure you're using good craftsmanship skills, meaning you're not leaving any white spaces and you are trying your best to color neatly. You're pushing down hard for darker colors and pushing lightly for lighter shaded areas. And then you can always come back and, like I said, fill in some of that dark green along the fins just to create some more depth in your drawing. And you're going to repeat this same shading process on the other front flipper as well as the two back flippers, making sure that you're doing the shading, coloring in nicely with your craftsmanship skills, and it will look like this when you are done, and we can move on then to the shell. I'm going to begin coloring the shell with the outside edges, but before I do that, I'm going to run my eraser along those pencil lines just to lighten the pencil lines. I'm not fully getting rid of them, I'm just erasing them so they're not as dark. I'm going to begin shading in with my dark brown color pencil, but I'm leaving a little bit of gap between each section because on a turtle shell there is a little bit of some white, kind of yellowish designs in between these dark brown spaces. So I'm going to make sure I leave a little bit of space. I'm going to go ahead and outline those sections so I can remember to have those gaps in place. So everywhere that I had those lines earlier is now going to be a white gap. I'm going to shade with my dark brown along the outside and then use a lighter brown on the inside just to give it a little bit of some depth. So it'll look like this when we are done. Then I'm going to use my dark brown color pencil to run along the outside edge of the shell and the inside of those first details that we made on the shell. Then once that is all done, I'm going to move on to the inner details of the shell, doing the same process, leaving a little bit of a white gap between each of those spaces so it'll look like this, and then I can begin coloring. I used a light brown first and then went over that light brown with a tan. If you do not have a tan, you can continue to just use your light brown as well. And then I'm doing a little bit of some green shading on those sections as well. I'm pressing down a little bit harder as I layer the color pencil together, so I'm starting light and then getting darker as I layer the colors. And I'm going to do this on each of the sections of my turtle shell. And since the outside shell of the turtle is very hard, it's okay if some of your texture of your shell is kind of scratchy, meaning if you can see your color pencil lines and they're not blended as well, that's okay. So when I shade with my green, I'm going to allow it to be a little scratchy. And then I'm going to use a yellow color pencil to just shade a little bit over the whole shell, filling in just a little bit of those white gaps with some yellow, leaving some areas white. And then I'm going to use my dark brown color pencil to go across the entire shell just in some random spots, some shaded dark brown areas. Again, remember it's okay to have some scratchy texture here on the shell because the outside edge of the turtle is very hard and it's going to have some scratches and some bumps from the different things it runs into in the ocean. I'm going to finish adding in some shading running along the top edge of the shell, and that will complete the coloring for my sea turtle.